Let's start with working on the quote grid component. Here I of course will also have my template and then some script. I also want to have a style here, so let me add that too. And what I want to do is in the template, remember here in the app file we do have a container where we will nest everything in the end, so a bootstrap class container here. So in there I therefore want to create a row, div with a class row. This shall then hold my quotes. Now in here, I will have my quote component and I will of course use v-for, so a for loop, to replicate it as often as needed inside of that row. Now what that also means is that I need to be able to get this array of quotes from outside. So in the script tag here, I will export a default object, and this default object here shall have some props, namely the quotes which are passed from outside, so that I have access to them. With the quotes available, I can then loop through them as soon as I have my quote component, and that is then what I'll work on next. So I'll copy this setup here, and here in my single quote component, I want to set up the panel body script here, style here, excuse me, because I will use this class here. It's a bootstrap class and I want to modify it a bit. Specifically, I'll change the font family to use the one I imported in the index.html file. That's Arizonia. And I can do this by setting up Arizonia like this. And as a fallback style, simply have cursive. I also want to set the font size to 24 pixels. And I picked a color code, which I found okay. And of course, style this to your needs. Now that is my single quote style for the panel body. I also will add a quote class here, where I simply want to set the cursor to be a pointer. And when hovering over this, I want to change the background color to this reddish look so that we can see we can delete it with this. Well, that's just the styling. Let's work on the actual quote. Well, here I actually won't need an object. All I want to have in here is not even a row. It's really just a class, a div with a class, call, and now let's say sm6, call md4, and call lg3 for some, well, different stylings on different viewports. And then in there, I'll use the bootstrap classes panel and panel default to get this panel look basically. So that gives it these round corners and so on. And in there, I will have a div with my panel body and also my quote class. Now in the div, I simply want to have a slot because the quote content should come from outside so that the thing passing in the content is the thing deciding how it should look like. Here I'm only creating the place where it will be rendered in the end, but it should be the holder of that content who decides how that should look like. Now the holder of the content, of course, is the quote grid here. There I already have my quotes, and with the single quote component now being created, I can next loop through all quotes to render that single quote for each loop and pass the content to it. Now try implementing that on your own. I'll be back with that in the next video.